Hello, my peaceful warrior. Today, I thought we would talk about how to set boundaries as a people pleaser. Let's get into it. Hello, my name is Katie Hunt. If we have not had the pleasure already of meeting, thank you so much for being here. I am a spiritual life coach and energy healer, and it is my mission to help women to become empowered, to step into their true goddess essence and let go of all of the stuff that is not serving them, like people pleasing. And I am here talking to you today because I myself am a lifelong recovering people pleaser. And I say that because I don't know if people pleasing actually ever leaves you. I'll let you know on my deathbed, in my experience, which is hopefully decades away, but you don't got time for that now. So, based on what I know so far, I don't think it'll go away, but definitely becomes less of the default, and that definitely becomes less intense over time. So, how can we live with this addiction, this wound, and how can we make it work for us in the best way? Because if you've listened to anything else that I have talked about regarding people pleasing, you know that it's not the selfless act that you may think it is. It's actually manipulative, energetically, emotionally, and physically. Because when you are doing something that you don't want to do, you are conflicting. You have conflicting energy. Your mouth is saying yes, your energy and your body are saying no. And you create resentment in the relationship, in your body, and in your energy. And resentment is no bueno. We don't like resentment. Resentment is something that is not worth your time, and it's not good for you. So we don't want to choose resentment. What we can do instead is get really comfortable with discomfort. Get really comfortable, really okay with being uncomfortable, having difficult conversations, and feeling that sense of like, oh, within you, and then not defaulting to people please in order to get rid of that feeling. The better you are at feeling uncomfortable, and the more that you understand that it's just a temporary feeling, you can do anything. There will be nothing that will hold you back, because people hate being uncomfortable so much that they will stay in jobs that they hate. They will not pursue their dreams. They will stay in a relationship that doesn't work, etc. So get really good at being uncomfortable, which sucks, I know. But if you do that, it will translate in more benefits than just not being a people pleaser anymore, as we've already established. So, what are some ways that you as a people pleaser can begin to set boundaries that honor your people pleasing tendencies? So, a way that we can think a little bit differently about this is when we think about how you might see what I call muggles approaching certain topics. And they would be very harsh. They would think a lot in their head. They would act in practical terms. You can think about this even in sales. If you've ever had a sales conversation with somebody who lives in the masculine-centered world, or if you've ever worked in the corporate world, and then you go and work with like a healer, or you talk to a love-based entrepreneur and they have a sales call with you, typically the vibes are completely different, right? There are different approaches in both of those areas because both of those areas kind of operate on a certain level. And you as a people pleaser, you operate in a place of sensitivity. And that sensitivity is probably what created the need to people please anyway. So trying to establish and overcome your sensitivity or your people pleasing by using tools that are on the other side, that are used by people who like setting boundaries, like people who don't have the sensitivity or don't have this people pleasing tendency, isn't going to feel nice, and it's going to feel wrong, and it's going to be extra uncomfortable. So because of that, I'm glad that you are here, because as somebody who is a sensitive person and also a people pleaser, there are ways that I put boundaries in and around my life that have created a really beautiful bubble. And so I would like to share with you a couple ways in which I do that. So why I'm saying all of that is because I got you. I understand that these things are hard to do. I understand that it's very uncomfortable. And I understand that you are a sensitive person and you want to honor that sensitivity because you care about people. I'm not going to encourage you to be a jerk. Okay. So set all of those fears aside and just listen with an open heart. So, how can you say no nicely? Okay, we've all heard that no is a full sentence, and it absolutely is. But in certain situations, as a people pleaser, and especially as a recovering one, just saying no is going to feel like stopping a freight train. It's going to seem like really weird and like super, super sketch. You're not sure how that landed, and inside you're like, holy shit, is this where this ends, or are we going to keep drifting on these train tracks for another 5 kilometers? So you just like rip the brake and you're Tokyo drifting all over the place. We've changed analogies now into a car, I guess. So it's going to feel pretty jarring, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's going to feel pretty jarring to just say no flat out. Please feel inclined, though, to use no in situations when you've already established multiple times and the person isn't listening or respecting, and also with your physical safety. No is a full sentence is an absolutely perfect boundary for you to use when somebody tries to hit on you late at night when you're walking home from the train. We're not going to get into that kind of stuff, but I understand that saying no flat out can feel really uncomfortable. So here are some other ways that you can say no. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm not able to accommodate that in my schedule right now. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I am not interested at this time. Keep me in the loop for future. You can even just say, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm so honored for your consideration. That one is a little bit open-ended. The theme here is we want to meet them with gratitude and appreciate them asking. And this works really well if you're being asked by somebody to, do some charity work, or your boss is asking you to do something, or a friend is asking you to do something, and your friend is asking you to like plan a baby shower or to attend a baby shower. And you want to meet them with grace and with love because you want to maintain that relationship. So you meet them with gratitude. And then you just say and then you use honesty, but in a way that is gentle. So gentle honesty. We don't want to lie. So you say, I'm not able to accommodate in my schedule. I am actually unable to attend. I'm not available that day. I will not be able to make it, but thank you so much for the invitation. You can even say, like, please let me know how it goes, or I would love to can't wait to see the pictures on Facebook. You can even end with something nice like that. So those are really good. I want to also caution you from making up excuses. So I know that a lot of times people are like, oh, I can't, I have this thing that I have to do. And then you inevitably run into them at Safeway when you're like stocking up for your binge weekend. And then they're shopping for the event that you lied about going to. So I don't necessarily believe in lying ever. And especially when you're trying to set a boundary with somebody, because if they find out, your credibility is shot. And also it's going to hurt their feelings even more because they're like, why weren't you just honest with me? Remember how we said in the previous recording that we need to trust that people can receive our truth. As long as we're delivering it with love and respect, there's no reason that somebody should get offended by what you're saying. If they're getting offended by what you're saying, it's probably because they're jealous about your ability to say no when they were thrust into doing stuff that they don't want to do either. Okay? So, step 1, we want to reach them with gratitude. Thank you for thinking of me. Step 2, honest delivery, honest response. I am unable to make it that day. I have a full schedule already. I'm unable to accommodate that at this time. Things like that. Those are all true statements. You aren't available. You are unable to go. You have plans already. So try to use honesty and say it in a way that allows people to know that you're not dismissing them completely. And then if you want, you can always say, I'm so grateful that you thought of me. I appreciate your thinking of me. I appreciate the invite, or even please let me know how it goes, or I can't wait to come to the next one, something like that. But again, you want to use honesty and fight the urge, or don't cave to the urge of people pleasing, where your people pleasing goes, oh, I should just say that I'll be at the next one, and at the next one I'll for sure go, because you don't know how you're going to feel then, and you may not want to do that in the future. So don't make promises that you don't want to keep. And be honest. There's nothing wrong with being honest. You can be honest and gentle at the same time. Another thing that I want to talk about with people pleasing is this need to overshare and answer questions that you don't want to answer. And I think by a lot of people pleasing experiences, I think that we can all relate to somebody asking questions that we don't want to answer, but feeling obligated to answer. And this again comes back to that wounded inner child. We learned that we had to over-explain, and some people don't have that, right? And some people can be really cool and collected, but we can have a tendency as people pleaser to over-explain and overshare when we don't want to. And so I'm not saying that you shouldn't overshare with people if you want to. But do you feel obligated to answer questions that are completely inappropriate and are not something that you want to answer? Like some people asking you about your health or your sex life or your childhood trauma, even with medical professionals or your bosses. Do they cross a line and ask you inappropriate questions? You know, I have a hard time sometimes standing up to authoritative figures. And I think that for me, in my mind, I'm still that 12-year-old kid that doesn't know anything, but I'm an adult now. And I actually don't have to give any other information. But the people pleasing within me tells me to share and to give this person everything just because they've asked me. Okay. So you don't owe anybody a goddamn thing. You owe your children and your pets to take care of them. Only, your kids only to a certain extent. And then eventually they are on their own. And that's a whole other conversation about boundaries that we will not be having today. But you have no obligation to make anybody else uncomfortable over yourself. You have no obligation to answer any question that anybody asks you. You can completely choose what you say and who you have these conversations with. So, here are some phrases that you can use when somebody asks you a question or says something to you that crosses the line. And these are those moments where you want to either snap into a response or snap at them and start a fight, depending on who it is. For me, there are certain members of my family that I'm just so quick to jump into a fight with. And other people I feel totally stunned by, and I don't know what to say. And then with strangers, I'm typically very, very quick to set a boundary, obviously, because it's easier with strangers. Or maybe not. Maybe it's not easy for you. That would actually be something I'm very curious to know. Let me know. Is it easier for you to put up boundaries with people that you don't know or people that you do know? Because when I've asked this before, it typically is like a 50-50 split, which I find fascinating. I digress. Here are some things that you can say when someone crosses the line and you do not want to answer. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Thank you for sharing that with me. It deflects, it is graceful, and you're acknowledging that they said something to you. You can change the subject. You can say, I'm actually not ready to speak on that quite yet. And you can say things like, I have been thinking a lot about that personally as well. And change the subject. You don't have to sit in someone else's discomfort, and you don't have to sit and try to explain yourself over and over again. In fact, as a people pleaser, you have a tendency to keep talking in order to fill the space so that they don't feel like shame or guilt for asking you that question. But again, as a people pleaser yourself, you understand that maybe they didn't realize what they were doing, and you have love and peace for them. And the best thing that you can do for them is when they go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that that was like a hot button." Or they say something that's also kind of like they're putting it on you as if you have the problem that you don't want to answer the question. You can just say, "I totally," or like, I respect that. I respect your apology. Thank you. Or you can just say like, it's no worries, and then just get up and go away. We don't want to necessarily say like it's no problem or like it's no worries if they really stepped over the line, because it's not okay. So you can say things in those situations like, "Well, thank you so much for acknowledging that," or "I appreciate you saying that." That's a really good one too. "I appreciate you saying that," because then they will respond with something, and you can say, "All right, I think I'm going to go grab some tea. Enjoy your dinner," or say something else and then walk away and go cry in the bathroom or something. If you have to. That's not a necessary step, but go deal with that discomfort within yourself instead of rambling it outside of your mouth, because inevitably, if they react in any way that's not like, "Oh, okay," you are probably going to say you're probably going to end up saying things that you don't want to say, either in a fight, like we've said, or oversharing and saying what you didn't want to talk about in the first place. Okay. So I've been thinking a lot about that as well. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm not ready to speak on that quite yet. I've been enjoying this process and I have nothing really to share at this point, things like that. When I started my business, I would get comments that were not always very helpful or polite at all. And being a people pleaser and being also somebody who was dealing with that fear, I would have to kind of sift through a lot of these negative comments like, "It's going to be really hard for you to find a job again," or "Aren't you afraid of like becoming homeless?" And I think like people work out a lot of their own fears in these inappropriate conversations and they project. But in that moment, when you're feeling kind of attacked, or you're feeling like it struck a wound within you that you've already been scared of, that you almost go into that little kid mode and you go into people pleasing mode. And in those conversations is where we tend to see the people pleasing really expose themselves, is because people are talking to our own fears and they are stepping over a boundary that we have within ourselves. We're not ready to talk about something yet. We've been thinking a lot about that ourselves. We have been putting the pieces together. We've been really enjoying this process, but we don't have a clear idea yet. There's nothing to share at this time. We have all of these things within us that are true that you can say when you have the desire to respond as a people pleaser. And don't feel like you owe that person anything, regardless of if they are typically a difficult person to talk to or they're your best friend. You don't have to give anybody any information. You don't have to feed your own fears by talking to them, but just go in knowing that there are phrases that you can pull out that you can use that are meant to diffuse those conversations and kind of kill them where they are. Because what is somebody going to say? "Thank you for sharing that with me." And they're like, "Oh yeah. Yeah. So, what about your love life?" You're like, "Oh, I'm not really ready to share on that quite yet. I don't really have any new information there or anything like that." Like, "Oh, are you liking Tinder?" "Well, I'm not really ready to share on that." Or "I would prefer not to actually talk about it." And you can have like different tiers, I would say. So you can start out by being really graceful and saying, "Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm not really ready to share on that quite yet." And then if they keep pushing, you can just keep reiterating the same thing. "I'm not in a position to talk about that yet," or "I don't feel comfortable sharing that with you right now." And then you can say, "I feel like you are trying to get information that I am unable to share at this time." Because if you also eventually keep getting pushed and somebody's trying to back you into a corner, you can just say like, you can acknowledge the behavior and typically it will change. So for example, if somebody says something rude to you as a people pleaser, it will either set you off or push you into people pleasing mode and you'll want to make them like you. So you can say to somebody, can you repeat that, please? And what you're doing is you're giving them a chance to respond to you and repeat that offensive thing that they just said. And usually one of two things will happen. They will not say what they said because they will have a second opportunity to think about what they said. And you're kind of calling them out on it. And they're like, oh yeah, that probably wasn't the right thing to say. They will reframe it, or they will say the exact same thing again. And then you can say, what are you trying? What is the point of you saying that to me? What is the message that you would like me to receive? And Marissa Peer has like a great sentence or a great methodology about this. It's basically like, can you repeat that? And then if they repeat it, you say, is that how you really feel? And if they say yes, then you say, are you trying to hurt me? And most of the time they will say no. If they haven't already jumped off the boat by this point, they should. But if they haven't yet and they say yes, like they're trying to hurt you, you say, well, that is definitely not okay. And I will not allow that in. And you walk away. Because if somebody is blatantly answering that they are willing to offend you and hurt you, then that is not a person that you need to continue to talk to. And this isn't something that you pull out the first time somebody says something offensive, because this will start a fight. But it's in those moments when somebody says something that is outwardly hurtful and they know that it's hurtful. And most of the time, if it's not intended to be hurtful, you won't even make it to the third and fourth step. You just say, can you repeat that? And if somebody says it again and they don't reframe it and you're seeking to understand what they're saying, you might have to even clarify, like, is this what you're asking me? I want to make sure that I'm hearing this right. Or to clarify, are you asking me if I am pregnant? And they say yes. And you can say yes or no, or you can say, I'm actually unable to share that information with you at this time. Or you can say, if you're looking skinny as ever and they're like, are you 8 months pregnant? And you're like, are you trying to hurt me? You can even make it a joke if you want to laugh it off. But these are things when people like are really offensive. These are some things that you can say. Like if somebody says something racist, this is a really good thing. Black and white, right? No pun intended. But somebody says something sexist or racist and it is outwardly offensive and it is rude, you can ask them to repeat it. And it's a great thing to say when somebody has been coached on this again and again and they continue to say it. If somebody has like missed the mark and they are not trying to be outwardly offensive, then they will correct themselves. But that's not up to you to decide. And in this entire thing, you are not being provoking. You are just establishing and you're seeking clarification. That's what these questions are, is you are seeking to understand what it is this person is trying to say. And if someone has had experiences with you in the past and they are always a jerk, they probably are always going to be a jerk, and that's okay because that's not your problem. So you can just intentionally avoid them. And you can have escape routes in your mind, okay? So you have an aunt and she's super rude and she's always in your business. You can just like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. Or if you have an ally in your family, you can like make eyes at each other and they can come up to you and say like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to you about something. Or I have that thing that I wanted to show you. Or I need your help with this email that I'm drafting or something like that. They can always come in and interrupt, because I understand as a people pleaser, you don't want to make anybody's feelings hurt. And I also don't want you to react from a place of rage, because that also, if you want to do that, girl, do it, because that's fine. But I really want you to think about seeking clarity and honoring yourself so that you're not giving so much energy away to people. Because here's the thing, you're a people pleaser because you don't like to see people hurt. I mean, that's definitely a component of it, but a lot of other people are not that way. Sometimes people are fed. Sometimes people feed off of people pleasers for the wrong reasons. Sometimes people like to see people hurt and squirm. And sometimes people like to get reactions out of you. And so you don't want to feed them, right? You don't want to feed into their sickness or into their like gross needs, right? And you can put up boundaries and still do it in a graceful way so that you're not put in these awkward positions. And when you are put in those awkward positions, that you have things to say. Please excuse me. That's also something that's fine to say. If somebody's like, hey, why aren't you married? You just say, please excuse me, and you walk away. Because here is the key. When I learned this, everything changed. If you don't make it fun for people to talk to you or to ask you to do things, then people will stop talking to you and will stop asking you for things. So, for example, if one of your things is you don't want to be gossiped at, if you make it uncomfortable for a person who's gossiping at you about someone else, they probably won't come to you and gossip anymore because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel as fun to them. But the second you begin to indulge in them just to people please, you will be their best friend at all of the events, and they will spill all of the tea to you even though you don't want to hear it. So it's the same thing for when like people are making like offensive jokes. Sometimes they're like, oh, you're not fun at all, and they like put it back on you as if like you have the bad sense of humor. And you can just excuse yourself. You can just be like, excuse me, or like be like, oh, I didn't get it, or I guess we have different styles of humor. And doing that in a way where it's not about like, oh yeah, I'm so stupid, like how we do it in our heads, like, oh my gosh, I can't even understand a simple joke. The fact of the matter is, Uncle Jerry isn't actually as funny as he thinks that he is. His racist and sexist and misogynistic jokes are actually not that lit. So you don't have to feel bad for not laughing at them or not understanding people's senses of humor if you don't know them very well. You can just like laugh it off, or you can say things like we've discussed, saying like, oh, I didn't know that was a joke, or oh, I understand now, or I guess we just find different things funny, and then walk away. So you can use a good sense of humor with all of this. Try to, create a lightness within you depending on who it is that you're talking to. Try to just experiment a little bit and do what's fun, and don't be passive aggressive by any means, but just have a little bit of fun with it. Sometimes what I'll do if I'm at a big family event, people always like to like feel bad for me. I'm the only single one there and have been forever, and they ask you all sorts of inappropriate questions. So sometimes what I like to do is to just mess with people is I don't consider it a lie, but I tell them all different stories and I tell them things that will shock them. So I'll say like, yeah, I gave all of this money to this Nigerian prince and then he just showed up at my door, and that's been actually going really well, and I actually might be moving to Nigeria. Or yeah, I started writing letters to this murderer in prison and he's so funny and he gets me, and I just can't wait to see him again, and then just walk away. So then people will start to compare these stories, and it's a good way to almost punish your family for asking you inappropriate questions. And if you're not insane like me, just, remember that people are inherently good, and that people aren't always trying to hurt your feelings, and that it is totally okay for you to say no in a full sentence. So experiment with all of these. I know this has been a lot. Thank you for staying with me. If you have questions about this, please let me know. I'm hoping that these will help you, and I'm hoping that with these new boundaries that you start to receive all of this energy back, and that you are able to just have the best life that's more centered and aligned to who you are, and not so convoluted with other people's energy, and not so many prongs in the fire. So you are worthy, you are wonderful, and oh, I guess one last thing. If you have a close friend that you want to talk to about boundaries, or you have a partner or somebody who's a little bit closer to you, when you decide to have a just combine those two words, a boundary conversation or a boundary, I guess, you can set aside some time to talk to them about it. And I would say have that conversation within a boundary and ask them first and make sure that you are in an open and receptive and loving place. And if you're not, you shouldn't have the conversation. But ask them, I would like to have a conversation about a couple boundaries. Are you open to that discussion? Or is there a better time for us to have that conversation? And so you begin the conversation about boundaries within a boundary, which is great because you also want to treat others the way that you want to be treated. And that is really important, right? You don't want to ask people for one thing and then you get to do another. That's not how it works. So when you have conversations about your loved ones, you start with the I statements. I feel this way when this happens. This is not an attack on you. This is just something that I have noticed that works better for me. And I was hoping that that we could begin insert boundary here. And I think that if we had this boundary, it would be really great for me and for you for these reasons. And I think that would just make me really happy. What are your thoughts? And just have a conversation about it. And again, people who love you and respect you will be open and willing and understanding about your boundaries. Okay. You're not going to be asking people to do things that are completely impossible. Even if they do have an awkward reaction at first, they will come around because they love you. And if someone is not going to respect your boundaries, it is a bigger conversation for you to be thinking about. That person belongs in your arena. Are they worthy of your time? So that is officially where I'm ending it. Thank you for riding with me this long. I love you so much. Thank you for hearing me ramble. And I hope that you have received some help on boundaries. I know they're uncomfortable. And I want you to let me know below. Is it easier to have boundaries with people you do know or people you don't know? Let me know. And if you are ready to instill some great boundaries in your life, you are ready to step into your power completely and heal this people-pleasing wound, I want you to book in for a free discovery call with me. It is like a mini coaching session for you to get help on your biggest obstacles and to get an action plan for how you're going to achieve your goals. And at the end, we can figure out if working together is right for both of us, because this isn't for everybody, but we can decide together if it is for you. So thank you. I love you. Goodbye.